Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome for the newcomers, to the second part of our info day on WIDERA, the Horizon Europe Work Programme dealing with widening and ERA. This morning was a very good morning, I believe. We had more than 800 viewers and presented the topics around the widening part of the work programme. This afternoon we are exclusively dealing with the part on the European Research Area. My name is Jörg Niehoff. I'm in DG Research Innovation, Deputy Head of Unit for ERA Governance and Implementation. And our unit is overseeing the preparation of this work program, but we collaborate with many colleagues in the DG and beyond to make this thing happen. What I would like to do at the beginning is simply to give you a little bit of background on how the political dimension of the European Research Area is reflected in this work program. For this we have a couple of slides, but before we go into that, a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, the event will be recorded and is online afterwards available on our platform and on YouTube. We will also publish the slides on our platform. As of tomorrow, they should be available. And we will later on see, we have after each block question and answer sessions where you can use Slido to submit your queries. And if for any reason we don't have enough time to answer them all, you can always go back to the web and submit your questions via the Research Inquiry Service and we get back to you. First slide, please. So, the European Research Area is a concept that goes back to the year 2000. At that point, it was introduced as a political dimension in order to somehow bring together the research and innovation capacities in Europe under a single umbrella, strengthen capacities, and lead to a certain degree of integration. It was the concept that is a little bit to the common market for goods and services translated into research and innovation, researchers, knowledge, and knowledge creation. Over the last 20 years, these things have developed in their own way, and I think both member states and the Commission at some point had the feeling we have to somehow revitalize that, and that was happening in the year 2020 with a communication from the Commission on the new European Research Area. It is still this concept of a single borderless market for research and innovation. It allows countries to come together, so it's not about the framework program, it's about countries and their programs and capacities to work together, and where we have a free movement of researchers and knowledge. There are 4 objectives that have been defined in the new European Research Area. It's about giving priorities to investments for the right priorities. It's about supporting industry and researchers in the market uptake of the results. It still has this very important widening dimension to make sure that we have a comprehensive European Research Area where all countries and regions can participate on equal footing. And it's about strengthening the mobility of the researchers and the flow of the skills, the talents, and the knowledge they create. On the next slide, we show you a little bit the timeline that demonstrates very nicely how the Commission and the Member States work together. It started, as I said, with the communication from the Commission, and that was then discussed in the Council and led to so-called Council conclusions, where the Member States collectively express their view on the Commission communication and give direction to the next steps. This led then in January 2021, so almost 2 years ago, to the establishment of the so-called ERA Forum for Transition. That was created to give a platform to member states, to stakeholders and the Commission to go into the details, fleshing out what should be done next. And that was then resulting in a proposal from the Commission on the so-called Pact for Research and Innovation in Europe. Again, with 4 priority areas that then were discussed in the Council and that led to 2 things. First of all, Council recommendation reflecting upon this Pact for Research and Innovation, and secondly, Council conclusions on the governance for the new European Research Area, including, and that brings us later on to our work program, 20 actions that are defined in the so-called ERA policy agenda. The actions in the ERA policy agenda, and we will see them later on the slide, cover a broad range of areas, and they are again implemented one by one in collective efforts between the member states, the stakeholders, and the Commission. And our work program for the years 2023-24 is now designed to support the ambition of the ERA policy agenda and many of the individual actions that are defined in there. Next slide, please. Now, the different elements that we mentioned. There is the Pact for Research and Innovation, which most importantly defines certain values and principles. It defines 4 priority areas that allow us to group the different ERA policy actions underneath. And it defines research and development targets that are relevant for all member states. The ERA policy agenda is covering the years 2022 to 2024 and includes at this stage 20 actions. The actions are seen as a proposal, and they are only going to be implemented if member states, at least half of the member states, sign up to do this. And I will show you the statistics in a minute. We will, of course, expect to have at a later stage a revised ERA policy agenda for the future years. This is created in work of the ERA Forum and at some point approved by ERAC and the Council. So these are the decision-making bodies that are steering the development of the new European research area. Of course, all this can only work if it's accompanied by a monitoring mechanism. To this effect, we are planning to launch next year an ERA policy platform where everybody can see the progress on the different actions, and the monitoring where we jointly with the member states and the stakeholders can follow up on what is being implemented and what are the impacts. Next slide, please. Now here you see that for almost all of the actions we have reached the threshold, and we are quite optimistic that we will also reach the threshold for the remaining ones. The blue color is the number of member states that have signed up. In orange you see the number of associated countries, and in yellow the number of stakeholder organizations that have signed up to these actions. Next slide. Here you see this per country, so if you are interested in how your particular country has been participating in this exercise and signing up, you can always go back to the slides or the video, and there you see the priorities of the different countries that they assign to the ERA policy agenda. Next slide. So now this is the interesting part, because this you will see reflected later on also in the work program. On almost all of the slides that we're presenting per topics, and you will have seen that also in the published work program, there is a reference in many cases to which ERA policy agenda action is supported by a particular topic in the work program. You see the range is broad, from European Open Science Cloud, data legislation, research infrastructures, which of course are addressed in a separate work program, to missions and partnerships, again, across the entire framework program. Hydrogen is something that is relevant for the cluster 5. We go equally to the EU-wide access to excellence. That's basically the policy angle to the widening work program that was presented this morning. And you see in the last part the monitoring mechanism, but also the ambition to somehow collectively try to increase the investments on certain areas for research and innovation. Next slide. We go one slide further, please. So now we go slowly into the presentation of the first topics. Before we go there, first of all, the announcement, invitation to participate in a week from now in the brokerage event that is organized by our NCP network. It's on the 9th of December. You see the link here that allows you to register. And here we try to give assistance as much as possible to organizations that want to join certain networks, that want to apply for certain topics. Secondly, I would like to thank all the colleagues that are participating in this exercise, because presenting the work program, preparing the work program is a collective effort of not only the people in our team, but of 10 units, 20, 30 colleagues across the DG. We also have to thank our colleagues in the Research Executive Agency that help us with all this, and that of course have the pleasure of implementing all this. So from the preparation of the calls, to the evaluations, to the implementation of the projects, grant agreements, follow-up, dissemination support, all this is done by our Executive Agency and the colleagues working in there. So a big thank you also to those that help us doing that on that end. With this, I would now invite our first colleagues. We are now working in 5 blocks for the rest of the afternoon. The first 3 are for the work program for the calls in the year 2023, whereas the last 2 we have for the calls 2024. I see all colleagues are here. So we have, and we start with her, Michaela, that will present a topic on program level collaboration between member states, so the old ERANET scheme revitalized. We have Jürgen with us on a foresight topic. Iphigenia will present a topic on experimentation exchange of good practice, and we have in the end Alessio on macroeconomic modeling. Now important, although colleagues will probably repeat that, the 2 topics presented by Michaela and Iphigenia are also topics for the work program 2024, and we will only present them in the morning. So in the afternoon we will not get back to that part of the work program. So it's a double presentation of the same text, basically, no surprises in there for the next year. And we start with Michaela, please.
Afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and present you our topic, so to say, in the WIDERA part of the Horizon Europe work program. Next slide, please. So first of all, a few words about the reasoning behind including this topic on program level collaboration in the WIDERA part of the work program. We all know that under Horizon Europe, we have a new approach for European partnerships. It is an approach which is more top-down in the sense that in the first strategic plan of Horizon Europe, we had already included 49 partnerships and also 5 EU missions. However, discussions we had with member states led to the conclusion that it is necessary to, and could be also useful, to complement this new approach to European partnerships with a more bottom-up approach, in the sense that giving the possibility to member states, associated countries, and civil society organizations to maintain existing and even establish new collaborations on priorities of their choice. This topic, as mentioned by Jörg, it is included in both work programs 2023 and 2024. Topic description is it is exactly the same, and it is linked to the ERA policy agenda action number 10, so making missions and partnerships key contributor to ERA. And I will get back to this in a moment. But first of all, so coming back to our topic, what do we expect in terms of outcomes from the projects funded under it? So first of all, we would like to see that participants identify common research and innovation priorities, which could be at national research and innovation programs, but could be also at regional program level. Of course, framing this exercise into international context, and of course, these were relevant. And this identification of common priorities should lead to development of coordinated R&I funding agendas. Another expected outcome is the implementation of multi-annual joint goals that would then result in funding of transnational collaborative R&I projects, but also implementation of other joint activities that would support, for example, market uptake or regulatory uptake of the results. And last but not least, of course, to support the participating member states or associated countries in meeting global challenges, including, of course, relevant contributions to sustainable development goals. So this rather bottom-up approach, as I said, complementing the new strategic approach to partnerships. So these activities could prepare the ground for future European partnerships, in the sense that projects funded under this topic could maybe in time lead to possible candidates for European partnerships. And here it is the link with the ERA policy agenda action number 10 about making missions and partnerships key contributor to ERA. So this topic could prepare the ground for future partnerships and missions. Next slide, please. So in terms of scope, so as already mentioned, it is about maintaining existing and established new collaborations. So it is about continuing in the spirit of the ERANET schemes and also extending it to EU missions. Also, it is about pooling the necessary resources from the participating program, so either national or regional, and also where appropriate, it is about leveraging other sources of funding to implement calls for proposals, either now or in follow-up actions. It is also about demonstrating potential at various levels, so national, regional, transnational, and of course, there should be no overlap with other actions co-funded by the Union under Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe program. The duration, of course, should be appropriate to the ambition and complexity of the proposals. Also, this applies to the budget requested. So we have for this topic allocated 6 million in 2023 and 6 billion in 2024. Of course, we thought about funding something about free projects, but of course each proposal could request less than 2 million or a bit more, depending on the ambition and complexity of a proposal. So for the time being, I thank you for your attention and looking forward to your questions later on.
Shall I start, Jörg? Already? Yeah. Hello from my side also to everybody. Thanks to Jörg and his colleagues who made this, prepared this very, very good. I'm telling you a little bit about the cooperative support action on foresight. This support action builds on a long history of foresight in the European Commission in the area of research and innovation. And we have made a number of kind of preparing activities. We had workshops with the member states during the council presidencies, respective. We have started a mutual learning exercise with mainly to bring member states and associated countries on a higher level to be able to participate in an appropriate way in this exercise. And of course, we try with this exercise to take up the momentum which was given to foresight with the strategic foresight network and the president for strategic foresight at the Commission. So these are, I think, very good starting points. We will only ask for one CSA because we are trying to build up or to strengthen the existing community and of the R&R foresight, and this will can use up to 2 million euros. An important element of these activities is that we include the member states, that we have the national foresight communities involved, and that these are well integrated in national policy systems. So we hope that this CSA also helps to develop that. The strengthening means strengthening the networks, building up common resources, strengthening the functions, and also strengthen the engagement with citizens, because foresight is a good means to do engagement or to have people and citizens engaged. This should, of course, help, and across almost all ERA goals, support prioritization, coordination, and direction of R&I investment in this context. We would like to mobilize these resources also using Horizon Europe and European framework programs. There's a lot of foresight going on, and this needs to be valorized also for the general policy on the national and EU level. We hope that we can join forces on pilot activities, on projects of common interest, and that these not only involve organizations dealing with foresight or providing foresight consultancy, but also governmental R&I foresight organizing unions in ministry. And this should help the use of science in general foresight activities, and more specifically, of course, the use of foresight for R&I policy. Next slide, please. As regards the task and scope, we have foreseen a stock taking, but this starts not from scratch. There's a lot of work going on which needs to be taken into account, mainly also in the mutual learning exercise and in the scientific community of foresighters. We want that the activities include stakeholders and potential users, so that's not only a side of the providers. We think that it's important not only to talk. Foresight is a lot of communication, but not only talk. We want that this materializes in pilot foresight projects on topics of common interest. This should, of course, use additional resources from member states or maybe Horizon Europe. And again, important, include foresight units in ministry and governments in these activities. Finally, it should end up in self-sustaining structures to support the Euro R&I foresight community, so that it can run for a longer period, independent of ever specific support from the Commission based on several sources. So this is the main task, to build up these structures which last longer. That's also why we only have this 1-2 year support, and then either it flies or it doesn't. I'm sure it will. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Jürgen. Much appreciated. So also for the viewers, the important small piece of information that you will hear now, Jürgen underlined, that's important that whatever proposal is submitted has also an approach, a policy for being self-sustained afterwards. And we expect to have a proposal that is comprehensive. You heard from Michaela that we have another topic, the one on program level collaboration, which is a competitive topic where we can fund up to 3 proposals, which also allows, of course, then different elements coming together. And the same applies now for the next topic that will be presented by Iphigenia, where we again have the possibility to fund more than one proposal and have a competitive environment where we look for the best submitted ones. Iphigenia, over to you, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. This next topic, experimentation and exchange of good practices for value creation, is supporting ERA Policy Action 7, so transfer of research results to economy and society. In other words, strengthening knowledge valorization. So with this topic, we are inviting consortia to address at least one of 2 challenges. First, there are many good practices in knowledge valorization at regional and national levels, and in fact, many of those are described in the Commission's knowledge valorization platform that can be used for inspiration. So the challenge is, how can we transfer and adapt good practices in different environments? And the other challenge is, of course, how can we develop and test new practices and new models for knowledge valorization? So this is a joint topic, one part experimentation and testing of new initiatives, and one part exchange of existing good practices. In both cases, the outcomes we expect are more knowledge valorization, so value creation through the collaboration of many actors, new solutions, of course, because of the transfer of research results, also by engaging society, and finally, make a difference through the reforms and the new models because of the improvements that will result from the testing and the exchange of good practices. So these improvements can be, for example, in structures, in strategies, in practices, and in skills for knowledge valorization. Next slide, please. So as I said, the proposals are expected to address at least one of these two challenges, and they can, of course, address both. The first is about testing new models and initiatives, and this specifically in the area of academia-society collaboration. So within the scope here are schemes and incentives for researchers to engage with society, with local communities, for example. And this would promote the uptake of research results for innovative solutions. We know that researchers can play an important role in engaging citizens and communities, and this can have a significant impact in making research more adapted to the needs of society. Testing these new schemes should highlight what works well and under what conditions, and what are the barriers, as well as the opportunities in this academia-society cooperation. The second challenge is about the transfer of best practices within the area, this time of academia-industry collaboration, or in the quadruple helix, so academia, industry, government, and society. We know that replication and adaptation to the needs of a new environment is a powerful way to support knowledge valorization, investments, and measures. So this is about the new environments reforming or introducing new strategies and investments which draw on best practices that already exist across Europe. And as I said, some of them are presented in the knowledge valorization platform of the European Commission. So it is very action-oriented. It is not about academic analysis. It is about a real change through the adapted instruments, tools, guidelines, and so on. And in many cases, these changes could also link to support from other programs like the cohesion funds and the recovery and resilience facility, for example. So this is a very action-oriented topic, experimentation and transfer of best practices. As Jörg said, we have it in 2023 and also in 2024. In 23, we expect to fund 3 projects and 2 in 24. And I am very much looking forward to your questions. I think I'm a little bit ahead of time even. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Fienia. Timing is perfect. Perhaps also as a reminder for our viewers, if you want to send in questions via Slido, please make a reference to the topic that is presented so that we can easily attribute the question to the colleagues. We have now one last short presentation with Alessio on the core topic dealing with microeconomic modeling. Alessio, please.
Yes, thank you very much for everyone for being here. So basically, this call is on new approaches to macroeconomic modelings of research innovation. We are talking about financing cutting-edge research by pushing the frontier of knowledge on macro modeling forward, and by doing so, generating discussion within and outside of the academic community. How to do it? So the idea is to improve the integration of research and innovation within macroeconomic modeling, while at the same time promoting the use of outcome variables on which those very same macroeconomic models predict, far beyond the classical employment and GDP variables that are usually used, but also on societal and scientific outcomes. So why is this important to us? Well, as we all know, macroeconomic models are used by the ECB, many DGs at the Commission, national governments, to forecast and ex ante evaluate the impact of different policies. And as we go toward the twin transition, the demand for economic models able not only to measure the impact within standardized framework of policies on GDP, but also on other variables such as those related to the green transition and the digital transition. So those models become more and more important. Next slide, please. Now, current macroeconomic models are good, but still not yet there. So by pushing and fostering research, we are expected to get as an outcome new models able to better integrate research and innovation, and that this will be crucial for the twin transition and to give us an idea of how R&I is important to give us a more sustainable and fair growth. So for that, we need, of course, better models that explain better the mechanisms through which R&I can channel fair and sustainable growth. And for that, we also need the best of the European scientific community. And we are confident that with open access to data and codes, this is likely to generate many spillovers of discussion within and outside the scientific community. And really helping in supporting how policies can be made, evaluated, and correct them in order to reach our overall goals. Thank you.
Very good. Wonderful. So we are now going to slowly go into the Slido questions. I've seen that we have already quite a few questions coming in. Perhaps we can start with Michaela. That is related to the first topic, program level collaboration. Do the proposals have to deliver all expected outcomes? Since you listen, I think in total 4 outcomes in your call text. Perhaps, Michaela, you can explain your expectations to what extent they all have to be addressed by each and every proposal.
Thank you, Jörg. Ideally, yes. Ideally, the proposals should deliver on all expected outcomes. However, we are aware that the initiatives that will be presented in the proposal might be at different stages in their lifetime, so to say. It could be that the consortium would simply just start exploring areas for cooperation. And in this case, of course, it might be that during the project lifetime, it won't be feasible for them to reach the stage of joint calls. So in that case, of course, they will not have to deliver on all outcomes because it won't be feasible. On the other hand, we might have consortia building on already existing cooperations, being an ERANET or being joint programming or any other form of cooperation. So in that case, we would like to see that they build on that and of course go to a next stage and they set up, joint calls and so on. So it really depends on the stage at which the consortium is.
Thank you, Michaela. And perhaps if I may add on that one, we are doing this kind of program level collaboration now since the Framework Program 6. And we understand in the beginning it was very difficult for countries, research funders to agree on call modalities, etc. Today, of course, the situation is different because we have seen that we have basically implemented hundreds of calls between funding agencies of member states. And so the knowledge on call implementation is there and is available on the ERA-Learn platform. So proposal also invited to look into that. Iphigenia, we have 2 questions for you on your topic. The one is, again, to explain your expectation in terms of coverage of one versus two of the aspects, and certainly also the question, do you expect policy recommendations coming as outcomes out of these proposals?
Okay, thank you, Jörg. So regarding the two challenges, in fact, the proposal should address at least one of the two challenges. So that means, of course, they can address both challenges, and we can very well imagine that the proposal also does replication as well as testing of new initiatives. However, there is no advantage if you do two challenges, you are a better proposal. We will have to assess the best proposals. So yes, they can address both or at least one. So regarding the policy recommendations, in fact, the text of the topic says that the action will develop policy recommendations. So the idea is that the action itself, so the policy action, will help the further policy development. It is not required for the project to develop policy recommendations. I hope that's clear.
At least it was clear for me. Thanks a lot, Iphigenia. And we have one question for Alessio. Is it expected to develop state-of-the-art regarding other macroeconomic models of R&I? Alessio, please.
Yes, so the idea is that in order to tackle this diversity of challenges, we are very much open to diversity and different approaches, so not only mainstream economics. So models such as agent-based models, as an example, are pretty much welcome. And the idea of taking multidisciplinarity on board, of course, standard, the state-of-the-art macroeconomic models will be also very well appreciated, but multidisciplinarity and the kind of out-of-the-box thinking, I think, is pretty crucial, since we are moving a little bit outside the standard parameters of macroeconomic modeling.
Thank you, Alessio. Very good. Now we have a question also for Jürgen on foresight, whether there is already a pre-existing consortium or to what extent this is up to the creativity of applicants outside to build a consortium. Jürgen.
Of course, the foresight community is well networked already. So it might be that they are also already working on it, but there's no preset consortium. So otherwise, I think we shouldn't have done it through a competitive project. So it's still open, and I'll excited who puts their heads together.
Very good, Jürgen.
And comes up with good proposals. We had this issue of policy recommendations, and of course, in the context of foresight, it's also interesting. And I think our idea is very much in what Oliver said, that actually we don't expect to end this CSA with policy recommendation at the very end as the output of the project. The output of the project should be structures, but when you are doing activities, these might deal with specific areas for policy recommendations. So I would be very surprised if from such a project there will not be any implications and recommendations for R&I policy and things like that.
And perhaps just to explain a little bit the difference between the open calls that we are presenting today and those that read the work program, that we'll see in later parts of the work program what we call grant to identified beneficiaries. Indeed, there are cases where we expect and we know which consortium should apply. And we use in that part the other action section of the work program where we pre-identify the beneficiaries. And you will see there are quite a few examples in this work program, presidency conferences and alike. But the call presented by Jürgen and all the others that we're presenting today are fully open, nothing is pre-cooked, and we just expect the best consortia to come together, and we will see in the evaluation what comes out on top. We have one more interesting question also for you, Michaela. The link between your topic and the Horizon Europe missions. Can that be exploited? How do you see that?
As I mentioned in the presentation, of course, this is not a topic that concerns only European partnerships, but it's also extending this bottom-up approach also to the missions. So it could be also project proposals that maybe will not, have projects funded. Will not prepare the ground for a future possible European partnerships, but would be rather something like for a future Horizon Europe missions, and also proposals could establish and be complementary with existing not only European partnerships but also to activities in the context of Horizon Europe missions. So both are possible.
Thank you, Michaela. So I was wondering if we have any more questions coming in, any last thoughts from our colleagues. Otherwise, we would break for a small moment and start again at 14:50. Since we have clear defined blocks, I don't want to be in a situation that someone just joins us for a topic of their interest and we have passed that already. So grab a coffee, answer some emails, and we continue at 14:50 sharp. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks a lot.
Yes, hello, welcome back. We are now going to the second block of call topics. Before we do that, a couple of general comments. We also received questions via Slido on general issues that you can go back to a presentation in the morning, because we had colleagues from the executive agency, WIDERA, that was presenting general tips on CSA preparation, etc. So please go back to that part of the recording. And then there was one on the particular question of Swiss participation. So of course, Swiss legal entities can participate in the calls, in the topics, in the actions, but they will not receive funding from Horizon Europe. Important to keep in mind. And the same applies for the UK. So with this, we go now to the second block. We have again 4 topics. The first one is on the valorization of results relevant for the ERA policy agenda. That'll be me. So I'll be back with you in a second on that. Afterwards, we have Gaia presenting a topic on an information platform on contemporary China. Afterwards, we go to Jean-Emmanuel on research assessment. And we close this part with Gabriella on citizen science campaigns. So we start with me on valorization of results. So you will have seen already from the first topics that we have quite a lot of actions that support the ERA policy agenda. And one thing that was concerning us is how do we make sure that all the good results that come out of these actions are actually brought into application, are shared with the member states, are taken up. And this is one of the aspects of this call topic. So what we want to have here is basically a mechanism that supports the broad implementation of the ERA policy agenda, that builds a community of practitioners that help us implement things on the ground, that help member states and stakeholders to bring actions into their remit and roll it out at the national or regional level, and also provides expertise and logistical support for events, campaigns, and other things. So we are here looking at something that is clearly to be prepared by the member states, by their funding agencies. This is nothing that can just come out of nothing. So we are really looking here at the colleagues in the member states, in the ministries, to put their heads together. And we want them to address basically 4 different outcomes. The one is what I started with, the dissemination, valorization, and the uptake of results stemming from the different ERA policy agenda actions. Then we want to have a mechanism that helps mutual learning between member states and stakeholders, because everybody is going to implement on their side parts of the actions, and we need to have that exchange of communication between them to identify good practices and share them among countries. Then the European Research Area is a very common term that we use inside the Commission. Some of our stakeholders use it as well, but out there I don't think many people can do anything with that term. So whatever we can do to also have that branding rolled out will help us to have a better understanding of scientists, of citizens, what is the relevance of the European Research Area. And last but not least, we want to have a mechanism that allows to develop recommendations for policymakers. So we don't want the consortium to come up with recommendations. We want to have a mechanism that allows to bring these recommendations together. We have a topic here that is for 2.2 million for around 3 years. We feel adequately financed. And we, of course, will only fund one proposal because this is one mechanism and not 2 mechanisms. Next slide, please. And in line with what we showed on the previous slide, this action has to address all parts that are described here. So the facility for dissemination and valorization, there has to be a dedicated package on the mutual learning, the support to coordination. The focus that we see here is on those actions that are not benefiting already from strong support mechanisms like standalone actions that are resulting from this work program. We want to see transnational events coming out of this, community building, and last but not least, to design a process that involves stakeholder organizations at European, national, regional level, member states, in distilling recommendations on the further design of actions and implementation. Now, 2 important points. We need, of course, a good geographical coverage of this. We want to make sure that all member states can benefit from this mechanism, which doesn't mean that the consortium has to cover beneficiaries from all member states. We rather look at the consortium to design a good way of bringing the core expertise together and then be able to subcontract, have experts coming in that provides that support to member states that are not directly participating in the consortium. And of course, this is nothing that can happen in isolation. We also expect the consortium to describe clearly how they want to collaborate with the Commission and make sure that we have a kind of a rolling exercise of perhaps annual work plans that allow to make sure each and every year we implement those activities together that have the highest priority. So an exciting topic for us because that will be a lot of support to the member states, to the stakeholders, to us for the next 3 years. And we hope that we, with this, can increase the impact of the ERA policy agenda as such. With this, we go over to Gaia and the topic on the virtual European info platform on contemporary China. Please, Gaia.
Many thanks, and happy to be here with you today to present this topic on building a virtual European info platform on contemporary China. So this topic has been launched to continue the Commission's endeavor to strengthen the EU's capacity to produce and connect independent knowledge on contemporary China in Europe. It is a follow-up to a first pilot action on upgrading independent knowledge on contemporary China, which was inserted in the previous work program. And as a follow-up, this new coordination and support action aims at creating a virtual European info platform that will network existing knowledge nodes from across Europe to collect, select, and mainstream China knowledge, also within the remit of the civil society. This will be done through disseminating material not only produced by the selected consortium, but also filtered from the work of other European knowledge nodes on China. Therefore, the topic encourages synergies with existing networks, including with the two winning consortia of the previously granted projects, which recently kick off, which are the projects dealing with a resurgent China and Reconnect China. This means, for example, that the research material produced by these two projects would be included among the material uploaded on this new info platform that will be created. A dedicated section on China's science, technology, and innovation development is expected to be inserted among the different thematic sections of the platform, together with translations and production of related policy briefs. It is important to disseminate China knowledge also through events and activities within this platform, including, for example, the creation of China-focused courses or trainings addressed to the civil society, so public-private sector going beyond the environment of China experts. As a way to create cross-fertilization of China knowledge in Europe, the involvement of centers of excellence from Eastern European member states is also encouraged. Next slides, please. To introduce a bit the background of this call, I would like to say that the need to upgrade independent knowledge on contemporary China was raised by the member states as a key priority for action in the framework of the EU-CNOC discussions, which is the EU Research and Innovation Knowledge Network on China that was launched in July 2020 to bring together the member states, experts, and stakeholders to discuss topics related to cooperation with China in research and innovation, and to foster, of course, a common response. So from those discussions, it emerged that China expertise in Europe is often fragmented and difficult to access, and that there is a need to better support and mobilize funding to produce independent knowledge and connecting existing knowledge hubs. So the work on upgrading knowledge on contemporary China was launched to tackle those needs. In particular, the recommendations on China produced by the former Strategic Forum for International Scientific and Technological Cooperation underlined the need to build a permanent EU info center on China for policy, academia, media, and business to really unlock and disseminate information. So this new topic comes from that specific request. It contributes to the ERA action number 9, specifically on the objective of launching a pilot initiative on the Team Europe approach vis-à-vis China. So through connecting and mainstreaming China knowledge in Europe, we aim at fostering coherence in the way the member states, stakeholders, and society understand China, and we aim at supporting evidence-based policy making that would allow the EU and the member states to develop a coherent and nuanced approach towards the way we cooperate with China. And this is, of course, in line with the policy framework set by the EU-China Strategic Outlook of Communication and the global approach to research and innovation, which calls for a more, we could say, responsible engagement with third countries based on reciprocity, a level playing field, and fundamental research and innovation values. So thank you for your attention, and I will take your questions later on.
Thank you, Gaia. We are so perfectly timed, almost to the second, as if we would have rehearsed this. Wonderful. So next is Jean Emmanuel with a topic on research assessment. And you will see, dear viewers, that there's a lot of reference to the ERA policy agenda and the actions. If you want to have more background, simply go on our internet webpage. There's more information available, including on individual actions, if you want to have a little bit more background when preparing your proposal. Now, please, Jean Emmanuel, over to you.
Thank you, Jörg, and good afternoon to everybody. I will be happy to present this next topic, which addresses research assessment. It's addressing research assessment in its different facets, meaning the assessment of research projects by funders, the assessment of researchers during their career, as well as the assessment of research units and research institutions. So I'll start, I would like to give a few hints about why this called topic, so the rationale for including this topic. Research assessment is fundamental for a research and innovation system that is functioning well. However, the current system of rewards and incentives has established a culture that is very much still dominated by competition between individual researchers in order to secure publications in prestigious journals. And therefore, reform of research assessment is needed. The aim of reforms is to move towards a system that recognizes the diversity of outputs, not only publications, that recognizes the diversity of practices, including early sharing or open collaboration, and that recognizes the diversity of activities. And this in order to better reflect the needs and nature of today's research, and also to maximize the quality and the impact of research. So this is why reforming research assessment is a priority of the new European research area. In particular, with a dedicated action, Jörg presented the list of actions, and action 3 is focused on research assessment. As part of the ERA policy agenda for 2022-2024. Important to note that during the last 2 years, an agreement was reached by several hundreds of research organizations, mainly in Europe, with commitments for changes. And more recently, actually earlier this month, a coalition of organizations committed to changes was just established to advance with reform. So this call topic aims at supporting reforms. It is in the form of a coordination and support action with a total indicative budget of 5 million euro for one project to be funded only, and with a duration of maximum 36 months. The expected outcomes are the first one, to support changes in research assessment implemented by individual organizations, being universities, research centers, research infrastructures, research funders, etc. The second expected outcome is about connecting these individual organizations that are involved with reforms. And this in order to facilitate mutual learning between these different actors and consensus building. The third expected outcome is to provide recommendations for policymakers, but also for research organizations and other stakeholders, so all those involved with reforms, on how to best reform research assessment. And the last expected outcome is to reinforce international cooperation and global outreach of the European efforts, notably to ensure coherence of the efforts in Europe with the rest of the world. Next slide, please. Consequently, the action is made of 3 parts that must all be addressed by the applicants. The first part will support the operations of the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, COARA. This part will support the sharing of information, it will support mutual learning, it will support awareness raising, and this across the coalition members, but also beyond the coalition members. A second part will support this time the reform of individual research organizations. It will make use of financial support to third parties, and it is expected to launch one or potentially more cascading grant calls to support the institutions across the European research area, notably those engaged in the coalition. And the individual grants here will be of a maximum amount of 60,000 euro, as mentioned in the call topic. The third part is focusing on international cooperation with entities outside of Europe. Here, the objective is to promote the European efforts, but also support exchange of information, explore possibilities to align the policies, and it will also seek to attract non-European organizations to join the coalition and the coalition efforts. I'd like to end here with two additional points. Important to note that the applicants are expected to develop close cooperation with existing initiatives in Europe and beyond. And applicants are expected also to build on and cooperate with other projects funded under Horizon Europe. And the call topic itself specifies in particular which earlier call topics have produced projects that would be particularly relevant for cooperation. I'll stop here. I thank you for your attention, and I hand back to you, Jörg.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Emmanuel. I take this occasion to raise 2 points that were hidden in the slides or partially mentioned in the slides of Jean-Emmanuel. We have in each call topic specific call conditions, and these you have to read carefully. I give you 2 examples. The one is on the participation of non-associated third country legal entities. So this is a topic where, contrary to what I said before, countries like Switzerland or the UK can receive funding. Important to look into these details. Secondly, this is one of the very few call topics where we allow what we call financial support to third parties or cascade granting. So the consortium is expected to launch a call for proposals and give money to the end beneficiaries. Now this is a very technical issue, but in order to describe that properly in your proposal, you have to go to the model grant agreement. There's a dedicated section on financial support to third parties. Read that carefully, because in your proposal you have to specify exactly how you're going to organize that. If you fail to describe that, you have a problem in the evaluations. So take the time, go to the model grant agreement and the annotations, and it will help you to describe that properly. Now we come to the last topic in our session number 2. With Gabriella, we look into the citizen science campaigns. Please, Gabriella.
Thank you to everybody, and thank you to Jörg, and good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, so this action on citizen science builds on our previous experience in upscaling into EU-wide citizen science campaign, the German Citizen Science Initiative Plastic Pirates, which has shown us as a citizen science project can have a higher impact when upscaled to a transnational level. But also we have learned, we have seen that to scale up small citizen science initiatives, we need to scale up into a EU-wide citizen science campaign. We need dedicated support that in the case of Plastic Pirate was provided by Horizon Europe as part of the mission Ocean and Water. Hence, based on this, this action aim to conduct the preparatory work necessary for the launch of an EU-wide citizen science campaign, also with synergies with the EU Research and Innovation Mission. So this call the call that is now open and will close by March 2023, aim to fund to support with 3 million euros up to two coordination and support action devoted to get these expected outcomes. First of all, the first outcomes is the identification of a citizen science initiative with high potential. Citizen science initiatives with high potential impact if upscaled to European research area level, the establishment of a broad societal coalition or networks of quadruple helix actors organized around promising citizen science initiatives, but also we expect as outcomes protocols and working modalities for use of the open transnational data repository and infrastructure, and proposal and commitment, if possible, for mobilizing diverse sources of funding to ensure the sustainability of the citizen science initiatives identified as promising for to be upscaled. This call has two conditions, two additional conditions. So for this call, legal entities in non-associated country are eligible to participate and receive union funding. And also, the beneficiaries of this call can provide financial support to third parties in the form of grant with a maximum amount of 60,000 euros. Okay, as a last thing, this call is related to the ERA policy agenda action number 14, that is the action to bring science closer to citizens. And next slide, please. So, taking into account that this action aim to conduct preparatory work for the launch of the EU-wide citizen science campaign and to foster the development of societal coalition, the action, we expect that the proposal funded by this action should conduct a screening of potential initiatives to be upscaled, should analyze the most promising initiatives in terms of synergy with one or more European Horizon Europe EU research and innovation mission, the initiative that have the potential to advance scientific knowledge and that can generate additional benefits such as increasing scientific literacy, improved trust in science, and so on. Also, the action should develop scientific protocols, establish working modalities with open data repositories and infrastructure, should prepare training, develop societal engagement and science communication strategy, and should propose how to mobilize the diverse commitment for funding. The Commission has put a lot of effort to support citizen science already in Horizon 2020. Co-creation of research agenda and the research activity in terms of citizen science has been funded by the SWOF's part of Horizon 2020. So now we ask the beneficiaries are invited to build for this action, to build this action on the existing knowledge base and experience already developed, and to work are invited to work in collaboration with existing networks and action, and develop synergies with the action on citizen science already funded by the previous WIDERA call. Project that address the building of citizen science community and to action to support and giving recognition to the citizen science in the European research area. Thank you very much. I wait for your answer.
Thanks a lot, Gabriella. We are now going through the Slido questions, and there's one that I would perhaps just take myself because it refers indirectly also to your topic, Gabriella. The question is, if projects that are currently being funded, here the reference to the 06 topic, are these consortia eligible for the call? And of course the same applies for Gabriella's topic. If we have ongoing projects, partners that are involved in these projects are of course eligible to apply for another round of funding in a different composition, in the same composition. There is no limitation there. Perhaps we start then with Jean-Emmanuel on the question on research assessment. Since you have defined these three parts of the action, is there any indication from your side what the impact is on the budgeting of the proposal in relation to these three actions? Jean-Emmanuel.
Yeah, sure. There is no specific budget for each part, for each of the three parts indicated. However, the call topic mentions that the part making use of cascade funding is expected to represent a significant part of the budget of the action. And actually the call text indicates that it could be envisaged that 40 to 50 institutions could be funded through this mechanism. And we also have in the call topic the maximum for each grant of 60,000 euros. So you can easily calculate and think that probably for this part, you would end up with between 2 and 3 million euro. But this is only an indication. Of course, the repartition of the budget regarding the different activities will be peer reviewed, will be assessed by the evaluators at the time of the evaluation.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Emmanuel, very clear. Then we have two questions on the contemporary China topic. If you allow me, Gaia, I would perhaps take the one on the list of Eastern European member states. Of course, there's no such list where we would give preference to one country over the other. I think consortia should look at that and see which configuration creates the best impacts. And then, of course, it's again, as Jean-Emmanuel says, up to the evaluation. And then there's, of course, the very pertinent question, how do you make sure that information gathered by this future project will be protected from potential interferences? Gaia.
Yes, many thanks. This is a very important question, and this is also why the topic text really focused on the concept of independent knowledge on contemporary China. This is a bit the fil rouge between the first pilot action and this action. So to allow the youth to look at China through its own lens, independently and unbiased from external actors' influence, including the Chinese influence. How to assure this? First of all, this is why we encourage also networking with existing networks. For example, increasing synergies with the projects that have already been granted, especially because they have been granted taking into account this independent knowledge dimension. So their project has been selected with this criteria in mind. So synergies and uploading material that guarantees an independent to safeguard this dimension is important. And also how we will guarantee this, also following very closely the projects and involving the consortium within the discussion of the EU-RNI knowledge network on China that I have introduced. And just for information, within this network, the aspect of research security is very prominent. As you know, there's been a staff working document on tackling foreign interference published in January 2022, which is state agnostic, and we are following up on that exercise also within the UCNOC network. So this is for the first question.
Very good. Then, since we are now at the point of switching to the next block, in 2 sentences, Gabriella, for you the question: does your consortium have to cover, in the consortium itself, a coverage of the quadruple helix, or can it be organized differently, please?
Very fast. No, the quadruple helix should not be represented in the consortium, but it's very important to have the quadruple helix actors involved in the EU-wide campaign. So in the initiatives that will be identified as the appropriate for or interesting for to be upscaled.
Very good. Thanks a lot, colleagues. That was again a very nice block. We are now switching to the next block. It'll take probably a couple of seconds for our colleagues to get the new colleagues in. And on that occasion, perhaps also the reminder that whatever isn't answered today, you can still submit later on via the Research Inquiry Facility, and we get back to you. And those questions where we see a lot of interest, we're also going to publish on the call page as frequently asked questions. So thanks a lot. Back in a second. Good, here we are again. And so now we have a block that covers 4 topics. 2 are on gender. They're going to be presented by our colleague Jeanne. And I have with me in the studio a colleague Lisa that is going to present the 2 ethics topics that we have in 2023. So welcome, colleagues. Thanks for joining us here. Especially thanks to Lisa for joining us physically in the studio. But we start with Jeanne, please. And you just present your topics one after the other. I don't need to break in between.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Could I see the slide, please? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present 2 topics on gender in the European research area. The first one is a policy support to facilitate the implementation of a zero-tolerance approach towards gender-based violence in the European research area. This is a coordination and support action with a budget of 2 million euros, and we expect up to 1 project to be funded under this call. It is very closely linked to our ERA policy agenda action 5 on promoting gender equality and fostering inclusiveness in the ERA, and specifically the second deliverable on developing a strategy to counteract gender-based violence in academia. So this is also the overall ambition of this project, to tackle gender-based violence, including sexual harassment in academia, and make sure that European R&I systems are more gender equal, safe and inclusive working environments. We have 4 expected outcomes. The first is to support various national R&I entities, including national administrations, with adopting a zero-tolerance approach towards gender-based violence and sexual harassment at higher education institutions and research organizations. We expect there to be better cooperation between national R&I actors from different member states and associated countries, including less advanced organizations, to facilitate the exchange of information, mutual learning and best practice sharing on how to best implement measures to tackle gender-based violence. There should also be training and awareness-raising activities for different research funding and performing organizations and all types of other R&I actors on how to best implement such a zero-tolerance approach towards gender-based violence at their organization. And then very importantly, there should be data collection and monitoring on the implementation of such measures at different research organizations in line with the Ljubljana Declaration on Gender Equality in R&I. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So in terms of scope for the mutual learning, best practice sharing, training and awareness raising activities, we would like to see a particular focus on widening countries, and it should also build on the communities of practice that are to be developed under the Gender Action Plus project, and also outcomes of the still ongoing UNICEF project that has actually now conducted a large-scale prevalence study on gender-based violence in academia. Then second, we are looking also for the project to facilitate the implementation of an EU baseline code of conduct on zero tolerance towards gender-based violence, and this should be adapted at a wide range of RPOs, RFOs and other research organizations in member states and associated countries. When fostering dialogue and awareness raising and training activities, the project should also pay attention to more subtle forms of psychological violence, including cases that result from hierarchical relationships, such as those between a PhD supervisor and a candidate, or other mentor-mentee dependencies, for instance. Particular attention should be given to protection mechanisms for internationally mobile students and researchers, as well as early career stage researchers in precarious positions. We know these are in more vulnerable positions also from the UNICEF project that highlighted that when mobile students, for example, file a complaint, often by the time this gets processed, they may have already left the institution. So this is very important to address as well. And then lastly, monitoring and evaluating the implementation process of the Code of Conduct on Zero Tolerance of gender-based violence is also key. So this should be, again, at a wide range of higher education institutions, RPOs, RFOs, and other research organizations. So on the next slide, you will see the next topic. Okay, this is a slightly different one. It's about the support to the implementation of an EU manifesto for STEAM education, research and innovation career paths to tackle gender inequalities in the era. Again, it's linked to the policy agenda action number 5, but more specifically, it relates to the European strategy for universities, where the Commission has worked in the last year on developing a roadmap of activities to address the underrepresentation of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics through a STEAM approach. Here, the A in STEAM stands for arts, but we actually consider this to encompass much more than that. It's really about a multidisciplinary approach that can link STEM knowledge to different social contexts and raise the appeal of scientific careers, and also attract thereby a more diverse talent into the STEM workforce. So the expected outcomes for this one are common principles and joint commitment on gender inclusive STEAM education, research and innovation among a wide range of R&I actors in different member states and associated countries, setting up a network of STEM-oriented businesses, secondary and higher education institutions, research organizations, informal science education establishments such as museums, and civil society organizations to support knowledge sharing, mutual learning, and structural change towards gender equality and diversity at organizational level. And then lastly, we would also like to see increased cooperation between these relevant R&I actors from academia, the private sector, and national administrations to foster women and girls' participation in STEM, also again through this STEAM approach. On the next slide, you will see more about the scope. So next to the development of this network of national R&I and education actors, which I already mentioned, and the setting up of principles and joint commitment for gender equality and diversity in STEM education, research and innovation, we are also looking for communication and awareness raising activities on the deconstruction of gender stereotypes and unconscious biases in science, and then also the benefit of STEAM education, research and innovation. There should also be more hands-on activities that support STEM skills development and learning opportunities for all genders, so not just women and girls. And this can include, for example, mentoring sessions, summer schools, traineeship opportunities. But again, here it's important to also involve the private sector, such as startups, also universities, schools, and science and technology museums. There should also be support for teachers and practitioners' skills development, so they really know how to approach this gender-responsive STEAM education and to increase their knowledge and expertise on STEAM approaches so that they can act as ambassadors for the implementation of the manifesto and other innovative approaches that will be developed under this action. So thanks a lot, and I'm still here for questions.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. So these were the first two topics. Jan, pardon. Now we are going to Lisa, and we hear about the two topics on ethics. Ethics is an issue that is not reflected directly in one of the ERA policy agenda actions, but it's part of the Pact for R&I and the underlying values, and therefore a horizontal issue that we are addressing here. Please, Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today, as said, to present two calls that aim to strengthen and support the research ethics and integrity frameworks in Europe. The first call is entitled Research Ethics for Environmental and Climate Technologies. Climate and environmental concerns pose a really huge challenge for research. Firstly, there is the challenge for research to deliver on the knowledge and technological innovations that are necessary to deliver on the green transition for Europe and globally. And secondly, there is also the challenge that research is conducted in such a way that it is taken into account that all human activity has to change to take into account the need to drastically reduce the climate impacts. So the aim of this call is to facilitate the implementation of the green transition in Europe by building an operational ethics and integrity framework which preserves and promotes key ethics principles, but at the same time supports a rapid and effective green transition in the European Union and beyond. In addition, it is important that this action results in the integration of ethics and in the integration of climate and environmental concerns in ethics and integrity frameworks, and addresses the ethical concerns related to new climate technologies, for example, agricultural and breeding techniques, geoengineering, and tools facilitating behavioral change. This call for proposals is a coordination and support action with a foreseen budget of 3 million euros for one successful project. Next slide, please. So this action should result in an operational ethics framework that clarifies the implications of climate ethics, justice and environmental concerns for research, and also supports awareness, implementation and changes in research culture. Therefore, it will be very important that this action also adopts a bottom-up approach, participatory approach involving several stakeholders and networks, but also citizens and civil society organizations. In addition, for this call, it will be required to participate with the Embassy of Good Science to ensure an effective dissemination of the outcomes of the project, also beyond the project duration. It is also required to develop traditional as well as online training materials for ethics and integrity experts, but also for students and early career and experienced researchers. To ensure there is inclusiveness and to facilitate international dialogues and mutual learning, it is also required that at least 2 entities from either Japan, China, the Republic of Korea, and/or African countries non-associated to Horizon Europe are included in the proposed activities. Next slide, please. The second call is entitled The Future of Research Ethics Review in Changing Research Environments. Traditional research ethics processes are challenged by a variety of developments in research. There is the rapid emergence of new areas of research and development, including big data and artificial intelligence related research, but also the shift of research processes to an online digital space with increasing amount of non-traditional research actors that are involved, as well as intensifying international partnerships and involvement in research. In addition, as research is at the forefront of Europe's digital decade, ethics review processes must also be prepared to incorporate new normative frameworks into research ethics that aim to incorporate these frameworks because these frameworks aim at protecting and safeguarding human rights and freedoms in the context of digital innovation and promote the adherence to digital rights and digital principles. For this reason, this call seeks for proposals that will analyze the impact of all these developments on ethics review processes, in particular when it comes to their effectiveness to embed human rights in the research leading to digital technologies. And also that this action, based on this analysis, proposes new developments, new approaches to research ethics review and assessment that promotes an ethics by design culture that fosters innovation. Furthermore, it will be very important that based on this analysis, methods are developed to support researchers in incorporating ethical principles into their work and to help research ethics processes to inform better the policy choices about the appropriate use of new and emerging technologies. Also, this is a coordination and support action with the foreseen budgets of 3 million euros for one successful applicant. Next slide, please. To contribute to the implementation of the outcomes, the proposed actions should also develop concrete proposals to improve the research ethics infrastructure in Europe and beyond, with the focus of developing quality criteria and benchmarking tools that can help research institutions, governmental bodies, and stakeholders to improve and assess research ethics processes. In addition, it is again important to involve stakeholder consultations to enable mutual learning and the identification of best practices in this area. Corresponding training materials must be developed for the purpose of students, researchers, as well as research managers and administrators. In addition, it is recommended to work together with research management offices and ethics office, as well as international partners, taking into account the cross-border character of cutting-edge research. Again, it is required to work together with the Embassy of Good Science to ensure effective dissemination of project outcomes also beyond project implementation. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions in the Q&A.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. And I see there are already questions in there coming for you. Before we go there, perhaps a general reference. There were also some questions, colleagues tell me, on eligibility criteria for CSAs, possibility to have coordinators from non-associated third countries. On this, I would suggest you go to the general annexes of the work program and look for the answers there, because these are very legal elements and I wouldn't want to go into this today. So now back to you, Lisa, on the topics, on the questions that we have received on your two topics. One is on the international cooperation dimension, and I understood from your presentation the answer is very distinct for the one versus the other, but perhaps you can elaborate on this and also on the question of what kind of stakeholders you are looking for in the consortia, and what does it mean in practice to have the do not significant harm principle expected under this call implemented.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. For the international cooperation, and indeed this is very important in the first call on including environmental and climate ethics in research ethics frameworks. It is a requirement to include in proposed actions indeed at least 2 partners from Japan, China, the Republic of Korea, and or African countries non-associated to Horizon Europe. So their international partners must be included. In the second call on the future of ethics review, it is also very highly recommended because many of the challenges that research faces in dealing appropriately with new ethical challenges and new types of ethical challenges have a very strong international dimension. So also there, it is very highly recommended to come to the project outcomes or the hoped project outcomes to include this international aspect, but it is not a specific criterion as in the first call.
You want to tackle the other questions directly as well?
Yes, certainly. For the kind of stakeholders, well, there's a broad variety of stakeholders that have a role to play in research ethics and in the development of research integrity frameworks. There are, of course, the dedicated networks that focus thematically, specifically on research ethics and research integrity, but a lot of associations of research managers, associations of universities also work on components of research ethics and integrity. And of course, it is very important that for also groups that represent students or early career researchers, young researchers, that are really very important to provide the sufficient support, education and training are also addressed in this context for these activities.
Very good. Then perhaps for the moment we go to Jeanne on the question that we have for her. Why do you focus primarily on STEAM for gender projects? What is your reasoning?
Okay, thank you. So we do not focus primarily on STEAM. I would say that the Commission has now been promoting institutional change towards gender equality in research and innovation for over a decade now. So we are focusing a lot of projects on structural change actions, but then next to that we also see that our She Figures study highlighted, for example, this big gender gap in STEM, where, for example, still less than a third of women are represented among PhD graduates for engineering or ICT, for example. So addressing this gender gap in STEM is very important to us. It's also one of the deliverables under the European Strategy for University, and there is also a specific action on this in the Digital Education Action Plan. So in short, it's not the only thing we focus on, but it is an important element.
Thanks a lot, John. That we understand perfectly. So now we have still a lot of interest in your topic, Lisa. So we have 3 more questions. We try to cover them as well as we can and as quickly as we can. So the 3 questions that are still up on the screen is whether some of the organizations, associations you mentioned, should they be in the consortium? Is there another way to collaborate with them? There's secondly the question on environmental risk assessment. How relevant is that for the topic? And last but not least, the question on do not significant harm principles. You can perhaps take them one after the other and we see where we can cover that.
To start with the associations mentioned in the call text, there is no formal requirement that they are included as a partner in the consortium. However, there is the specific requirement that the Embassy of Good Science, that collaboration is foreseen, because this is an entity, an organization that specializes in the dissemination of research ethics and research integrity guidelines and frameworks. So collaboration with them is required. Of course, the other organizations that are mentioned in the question, EARMA, ENERI, ENRIO, are of course very important stakeholders for research ethics and research integrity. So in that capacity, when you include stakeholders and foresee stakeholder engagement in several activities in the projects, then these would indeed be partners that could deliver a contribution to the activities. For the second question on environmental risk assessment and the mention of it in the topic, This relates for the call for proposals on climate ethics and environmental ethics. This relates to the second aspect that has to be analyzed and included here in the analytical work as well as in the guidelines. So on one hand, there are the ethical challenges raised by new climate and environmental technologies, but research as a very broad category of activities as a whole also has environmental impacts. And it's also important in this call that in the analysis is included how research, when it is conducted, how it can better take into account the demands of climate change, the demands of changing as a whole throughout society, our behavior, the way we organize things. So in that sense, environmental risk assessments might also be relevant to take into account how ethics frameworks can be elaborated in that respect. And for the final question I see about the expected implementation on the do no significant harm principle, this is actually quite similar. It's very important that research ethics frameworks, which traditionally have put a very strong emphasis on the protection of research participants during research activities, that this scope is expanded and also that we try to see how we can use this framework to better protect our environment and the climate when conducting research. I hope this clarifies the points. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. So I think we conclude with Jeanne and 2 more questions on your topics, and then we slowly move on to the 2024 session. So Jeanne, please, you can read out briefly the questions and provide your answers if you may.
Okay, I see here the question on both calls on the agenda one will only fund one project, which seems to narrow options very much. What kind of consortia are we expecting? So indeed, it's only one project that we expect to be funded under this call. For zero tolerance, that also makes sense because we do want to have one zero tolerance approach that really addresses a wide range of R&I actors. So it's better to have this sort of one project that focuses on all the different institutions and has a more strategic approach rather than developing lots of different actions under different projects that then have potential overlaps or less synergies, for example. And then in the next question on supporting the EU Manifesto for STEAM education, if I can elaborate on informal science education establishments. So this could be, for example, science and technology museum. It's really to recognize that STEM education does not only take place in classrooms, it's also in informal science education environments. So involving them in these activities and having collaboration between them will be very important because they also have a lot of these sort of STEAM approaches from which traditional education can learn more creative approaches or interactive ones that bring STEM closer to young students and learners. So I hope that answers the question.
Very good, thanks a lot. So I would now like to close the session, but I would like my colleagues with the slides to bring on the screen one more time the next slide, which is on the brokerage event that we have on next Monday, simply to make sure that everybody interested in that 2023 call has the possibility to register here. So please use that possibility. With this, I would like to close our session. Many thanks to Jeanne and Lisa and the speakers from the previous sessions, Gaia, Jean-Emmanuel, Gabriela, Michaela, Jürgen, Iphigenia, and Alessio. We will see you back in 2 minutes for the 2024 call. Happy to have you back and stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm now joined in the studio by two colleagues, Stijn and Dario, which are going to present in total 3 topics. Before we go there, just a reminder that for the call 2024, we have a number of topics that were presented already in the previous session. There's the one on program level collaboration between national and policymakers. So this topic, if you want to watch that, go back to the previous session. The same applies for the topic on experimentation and exchange of good practices for value creation. Both topics are relevant for both years, and of course we present them only once. There's one more topic that we're not going to present this afternoon. That is the topic ERA 0102, Emerging Needs of the ERA Policy Agenda. You might have seen there's already a footnote announcing that this is likely to be updated. And of course, we would like to do that before the calls 2024 open to make sure that the most relevant policy developments are reflected in the call text. With this, I go now to Stijn and Dario that are going to present a topic on the professionalization of research management. That will be Stijn first. Then we go to Dario on strengthening researcher skills, and then back to Stijn on the acceleration services for the European Excellence Initiative. Stijn, please.
Thank you, Jörg. Good afternoon, everyone. So I will present first topic on professionalization of research management. This topic fits in the ERA Policy Agenda Action 17, Research Management Initiative. The idea of this topic is to contribute to improve the European research innovation system across the entire ERA by strengthening the capacity of research management in both public research performing and public research funding organizations. We're expecting a large number of public RPOs and RFOs to be involved and the research management staff. We expect to see also improved accessibility to programs for training of research management staff, and especially from regions of lower research and innovation intensity, like widening countries, but not limited to that. The topic as a whole tries to improve upskilling of research management staff in its broad sense, meaning research project managers, grants administrators, knowledge valorization officers, data stewards, research infrastructure operators. We are targeting a wide community of what is called research managers. Especially the call targets professionalization. We aim for a project that can help us in developing certification of training programs for research management staff. And given the latest discussion in the ERA policy agenda related to this action, there's an important assignment for this project that we will fund on increasing awareness. Increasing awareness amongst governments about the added value of research management of the profession, and amongst institutions who have a lower capacity of research innovation. So the target is, the budget is foreseen for €1 million for one project in a coordination and support action. And that call closes on the 12th of March like the others. Next slide, please. So we have 2 pilot projects ongoing. It started last summer. It's important for this new topic that we see complementarity with the activities ongoing in these 2 pilot projects. One focuses on training and networking, the other on HR, human resources activities. So we ask you to develop solutions to the main challenge of the research management community, which is the need for networks for practice exchange, especially for early career research, the need for continuous upskilling. There are a lot of new activities like open science, like gender equality, sharing of research infrastructures. There are important skills needed for knowledge valorization, so a special attention to these. There's also need to increase recognition of the profession and the careers, hence also the awareness creation among governments. And there is a need to solve the uneven distribution of capacity of research management. So make sure when you make your application to be complementary to existing activities, and especially put attention to awareness creation and accessibility of the initiatives that you will develop or that are existing already for staff from entities with lower R&I intensity. So we expect to see some innovative approaches on that level. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stijn. So what you see in this topic and in many other topics is a lot of aspects of transformational change of universities, of research organizations, higher education institutions. So we try to really have systemic changes in these institutions. And the next topic to be presented by Dario goes in the same direction again. Please, Dario.
Thank you very much, Jörg. Indeed, this topic, I think the slide is not the correct one. Yes, perfect, thank you. So this topic is on strengthening researchers' skills for better careers, leveraging the European Competence Framework for Researchers, Research Comp. This is a topic which focuses on researchers' skills. Researchers, as we know, are highly skilled talents, but very often, unfortunately, they miss the transversal skills they need for successful careers also beyond academia. So this action aims to foster these skills, in particular through the use of Research Comp, which is the upcoming European Competence Framework for Researchers, which will be online in the coming weeks. This action is also strictly linked with Action 4 of the ERA policy agenda on strengthening research careers. I have to say that the budget indicated on the slide is not the correct one. In fact, it is €500,000 for one project. When it comes to the expected outcomes, well, basically we want researchers at all career stages to be equipped with these transversal skills that they need for careers that are really intersectoral and interoperable. The exchange of best practices for skills training, and also we want researchers that are equipped with the skills that can meet the labor market demands. And therefore, we expect that the projects contribute to co-developing training programs with the private sector. Contribution also to the certification of micro-credentials, and then improved communication of science to the public to attract more young talents to the research careers. And we can move to the next slide, please. Here I can tell you what are the important policy, what is the important policy background, and in fact the work on skills is something on which we have dedicated over 2 years. First with the update of the European Skills, Competences and Occupations Classification, ESCO, and then with the development of the European Competence Framework for Researchers, Research Comp, which is really a pillar in this topic, and it will be online between the end of this year and the beginning of next one. The projects are expected to contribute to the activities that I mentioned earlier. And talking about the activities, this may include the roadmap development, networking, sector-specific training program development, seed funding for training developers in the academic sector or beyond. And I will stop here, and I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Very good. We continue straight with Stijn with the last topic in this block on the acceleration services, please.
Thank you. So this action is targeted to universities, higher education institutions. And the idea is to help universities to develop in line with the ERA, the European Research Area Policy Agenda. This goal targets 4 projects, more or less, with a total budget of 9 million euro. And what are acceleration services? We mean counseling. So experts, a group of experts in many areas from the ERA policy agenda, like open science, like research careers, like knowledge valorization, that can be used by universities or associations or alliances of universities to make progress in these areas. So an expert can help the universities to develop a strategy and implement a roadmap in that sense, in the areas that they want, of their own choice. Basically, the expert will help them in making progress in accelerating change in the ERA areas. It can also be seed funding to deploy such activities at the institutional level. We aim for a successful institutional reform and upgrade of higher education institutions in research innovation, in the ERA priorities. And we especially focus in this acceleration services to research careers, modernized research careers, as well as overall increased excellence in science and value creation. Next slide, please. Activities may include the creation of a shared knowledge base on key ERA priorities for universities, coaching services, as I said, experts, consultants, that can help universities, a virtual meeting place that be created for practice exchange between the institutions, and as well as seed funding to implement certain activities. Specific points of attention are that the project should be aligned well with other tools like HE Innovate, take into account the HR Excellence in Research Award, as well as activities that are already ongoing, such as there are 3 acceleration services projects already, which will start in January. So one is focusing on knowledge valorization, other on HR, and another on several ERA areas. So look for complementarities. It is especially important that you take into account that there are a lot of experts in many of the ERA priorities available, and tools and platforms from previous projects under Horizon 2020, Science with and for Society. So make use of these tools, make use of these experts. Back to you, Jörg.
Thanks a lot to both of you. So just as a reminder, you saw the duplication of information on the slides. For the topic that Dario presented, strengthen research skills, this is a topic with 0.5 million and 1 project will be funded, and we are going to correct that in the slides that we publish on the internet. We have a couple of questions coming in. Perhaps we start with you, Dario. You said that the research comp is almost ready to be published. Where can colleagues find it?
Yes, thank you, Jörg. In fact, we are currently developing the website, so we really hope that it can be online, if not by the end of this year, at the beginning of next year, so in January. So it will be on the Commission website with a dedicated website where people will be able to access it. And of course, it will be very important because it will be the pillar, really, of the topic that I presented.
Okay, so everybody relies on you doing that on time, so we get a good proposal that can fully reflect on this. Then for you, Stein, we have a couple of questions on the acceleration services. What do you expect from the shared knowledge base? Is it people, is it tools? And secondly, with all the ERA priorities that are relevant for universities, why focusing here on careers and researchers?
The knowledge base are, experts, people indeed, but also there's progress has been made in several areas of the ERA. So the tools that are available should be shared. The models that are developed that are successful should be shared. So that's the idea of the shared knowledge base, so that not only large user groups within this project have access to it, but wider than that. Why the focus on research careers? The strengthening of research careers, making them more attractive and more sustainable across the entire ERA is the most committed ERA action. It is seen as one of the key priorities to invest in people And that's why we would like to focus also the acceleration services on strengthening research careers. It is one of the most important activities that we have in the ERA, the focus on people. So acceleration services will help in implementing new measures at institutional level.
Very good. Since this is a repeat topic that has already been published in 2021, is it of value for proposers to look into the existing projects as inspiration or to make sure that they don't duplicate what has already been done? And where would they be able to find this kind of information?
Exactly. All this information is published on the Cordis website, and more will be available in the coming year. So this is a call for 24, so we will try to collect this information, for instance, through the frequently asked questions, so with the exact links, so that you can have clear access to it.
Indeed, my mistake. The call was in 22, so projects are about to start, and we will have more information on Cordis. So with this, I think we are running out of questions from the Slido. Again, many thanks to Dario and Stein, especially for joining me here in the studio. It's nice to have company. We have a break until 16:15, so that gives us around 8-9 minutes. And we see you fresh and shiny for the last 6 topics that we're going to present. Thank you. So, dear viewers, welcome back to the last session that we have here. As a reminder, everything today is recorded, everything will be on our platform and on YouTube, and the slides should be available from tomorrow on our platform. Now we have a last block with, I think in total 6 topics, yes. So we have Alea that's going to go ahead with capacity building on IPR, management to support open science. We will have Jean-François back with us on global cooperation for not-for-profit open access publishing. Pantelis, hi Pantelis, will present to us the support of the development and implementation of policy and practices for reproducibility of scientific results. Anne will present 2 topics on gender, and Michaelis will have another topic on ethics for us on artificial intelligence this afternoon. So we start straight away with Alea. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. So I'm going to present the Horizon WIDERA 2024 ERA 0107 topic, indeed on capacity building on intellectual property management to support open science. So as many of you will probably know, open science is a policy priority for the European Commission. It is embedded across the framework program for research and innovation. Open science increases the quality, the efficiency, and also the responsiveness of research. And how will this topic support open science? So this action aims to increase the understanding amongst the research community of intellectual property assets and their role as enablers of open science. The call opening is on the 6th of December 2023. It will close on the 12th of March 2024. It is linked to the European Research Area Policy Agenda Priority Action number 2. That is the action that seeks to propose an EU copyright and data legislative and regulatory framework which is fit for research, a legislative framework that allows for access and reuse of publications and data for research purposes and that result from the scientific process. This action is a coordination and support action with an indicative budget of 2 million and the indicative number of projects is of 1 project. The expected duration is of a maximum of 24 months and the specific conditions that apply to this topic is the early and open sharing of the resulting education and training materials of this topic under open licenses. So what are the expected outcomes that we would like to see? First, an analysis of how an adequate intellectual property management enables and boosts open science and how IP management and open science are complementary in achieving a better dissemination and valorization of knowledge. Secondly, providing specific training materials, modules or courses on intellectual property assets and open science, and in particular on how an adequate management of intellectual property rights can enable, for example, and amongst others, open access to scientific publications and that scientific research results are fair. Fair means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. By being openly accessible and by being fair, these research results allow for reproducibility and allow also for the reusability of research results. That is why not only what is resulting from this topic should be reusable, but also what is used for this topic, we hope that will be reusing existing materials and adapting them when necessary, of course. Another expected outcome is to deliver high-quality training to the trainers, following the concept of train the trainer, and also to support these trainers in acting as multipliers within their research performing organizations, for example, by embedding the outcomes, the training and education materials as part of the curricula or the support materials available within the research performing organization. Another expected outcome under this topic is to gather experiences and sharing good practices for the further development of courses on the topic, and also awareness raising campaign on how an adequate IP management enables and fosters open science. For this campaign, we expect to be built this campaign on existing campaigns run by the European Commission, the European Union Intellectual Property Office, the European Patent Office when relevant, or EISMEA, the European Innovation Council and SMEs Executive Agency. Next slide, please. So the scope of this topic is to improve the understanding of the relationship between open science and intellectual property, and in particular, how an adequate management of intellectual property lies at the very core of open science, and in particular, an adequate management of copyright, and when applying to data, copyright, and also database rights. Also, it's part of the scope to have a greater awareness of the researchers' intellectual property rights and how they can be exercised to allow them to comply with funder open access mandates. For example, under Horizon Europe, our beneficiaries are required to provide immediate open access to their scientific publications that result from their actions, and also to ensure that research data that emanate from the actions are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So how to manage the intellectual property rights that they have in order to ensure that? Sometimes, for example, researchers are confronted to an assignment of copyright when signing certain publishing agreements. So an adequate management of copyright should enable them to meet the funders' obligations, such as those that they have in Horizon Europe. Also, part of the scope is to support education and training in intellectual property management that enables open science, and capacity building, of course, in research organizations and their staff, with the objective to support and equip researchers at all stages of their career with the knowledge they need in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alea. Very good. And we move directly over to Jean-François. Pardon, not Jean-Emmanuel. Now that I look at your face, of course, obvious. So, Jean-François, the topic is yours.
Thank you very much, Jörg. And hi, everyone. I'm very happy to present you today this topic on open access. There are not so many. We have about one topic every year, every 2 years. All the words are important in global cooperation in non-for-profit open access publishing. So you've seen open access growing. Some of you maybe have participated already to some projects. This is going to be a little bit different. With this topic, we would like to address some of the inequalities that maybe some of you have seen, experienced in your everyday practice of research and science, which is the fact that as alternatives to commercially oriented publishing solutions, there's been a rise of non-for-profit open access solutions, but sometimes not all of them would appear as robust or as reliable as one would have liked them to be. So we put this topic, which is going to open in December 2023. So this is a kind of a flavor that we can give you. You have lots of time to prepare your thoughts. It's a CSA, and we put aside 2.5 million. So we think that could be for one project and a maximum of most probably 3 years. Very important in that green box is the fact, and it's quite normal when we talk about global cooperation, the fact that legal entities established in non-associated third countries may participate and in that case also receive union funding. So that's a very important point. What are the expected outcomes of that topic? So global cooperation in non-for-profit open access publishing. 4 simple words. First of all, the coordination of those institutional non-for-profit open access publishing services that exist in Europe, but also in other areas in the world, but that coordination at a non-technological level. I'll come back to that with the next slide later. The second point among the expected outcomes is the improvement and implementation of good practices, most probably through trainings of the service providers and the scientific journal editors. The idea is to improve both the quality of the services that are provided by those non-for-profit open access publishing solutions, and overall also their scientific quality. Third expected outcome is this communication, this transfer of knowledge between those relevant non-for-profit open access publishing services inside Europe, but also with other areas in the world, very clearly, this is not a one-way ticket. We really want to see really bridges between different areas of the world and Europe. So what we have in mind is maybe an uptake of elements of open science by those services that are, maybe struggling a little bit with the open access publishing solutions that they offer. So reinforcement of the bridges between the EU other areas of the world to support as much as possible to increase the equity in open access and also eventually help to empower academics and non-for-profit solutions. With the next slide, we will see together the scope of that topic, global cooperation in non-for-profit open access publishing. Well, I think you understood. It's quite straightforward. It's about addressing the many inequalities that we see in open science, in open access policies, but those inequalities have been inherited from the established system already of publishing. So we would like to tackle issues such as socioeconomic backgrounds, gender, which is also a file of itself, ethnicity, etc. Very importantly, also as a scope, it's about gathering good practices, sharing them, improving them, implementing them, of course, good practices when it comes to non-for-profit open access publishing venues. Very importantly, about existing venues. So this topic is not about funding ex novo some publishing venues. So it's about what is already in place. The tools at disposal could be training material and especially some virtual training. So the aim is eventually for those publishing venues to be better trusted by researchers across countries, across disciplines, by authors, by the scientific community. So very importantly, we talk about non-technological aspects. So we talk about the organization of the editorial processes, the know-how of publishers, business models, peer review policies, whether they are open or not, maybe also some multilingualism, translation issues. So we focus on non-technological aspects because this topic is complementary to two other topics. One from 22, which is on improving and coordinating technical infrastructure for institutional open access publishing across Europe. And the other one that was 2 years ago led to a project that is going to start very soon, which is called DMS. And last but not least, we wanted also to insist on the budget because this topic might gather together partners from different areas of the world. Because of that specific dimension, we believe that most of the activities of the actions should take place online. It's not about jet setting the world, but it's about increasing the quality of non-for-profit open access publishing venues. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jean-François, and particularly like your last comment, I think we should include that more systematically in the drafting of the work program. With this, we go to Pantelis on a different topic, reproducibility of scientific results. Please, Pantelis.
Thanks, Jörg. Also very happy to be here to present topic 2024 ERA 0109. The aim of this action is to facilitate the development and implementation of policies and practices by research performing and funding organizations, as well as by learned societies and by publishers, with the aim to enhance the reproducibility of research results. By reproducibility of research results, we refer to the possibility for scientists to obtain the same or confirming results as the originators of a research conclusion. And why this is important? It is important because it increasing the reproducibility of research results contributes to higher quality and more efficient research processes. It contributes to more trustworthy results. It increases the reuse by other researchers of research results, and it leads to more effective translation into innovations and higher return on investments for research. It is a call that opens similarly to the rest on next year, so almost a year from now, 6th of December 2023, closing on the 12th of March 2024. It is a coordination and support action with an indicative budget of 2 million euro to support one project. And we note here that legal entities established in non-associated third countries may participate and may receive funding for this action. So what do we expect in terms of outcomes from this action? First, to facilitate the development, implementation, and monitoring of interventions in research organizations. Second, collaboration. It is about collaboration, so joint actions by stakeholders and mutual learning, specifically between national reproducibility networks. Third, it is about alignment of policies and reduction in disparities between organizations and between countries in the area of reproducibility of research results. And fourth is about facilitated development and implementation of training programs and awareness raising. Next slide, please. So what is the scope of this action? So in relation to what we expect in terms of outcomes, the scope is about support. First of all, supporting research organizations to develop and implement policy interventions. Is about mutual learning, so supporting mutual learning and dissemination of good practices between the organizations in the European Union, but also outside the European Union. It is about coordination, so coordination of efforts between stakeholders. We have seen in the recent years the establishment of different national reproducibility networks, and this action highlights that it is also about coordinating these existing European national reproducibility networks, but it is also about facilitating the development of additional networks in other European countries. It is also about training, so training materials, training programs, exchange of practices and tools, awareness raising for researchers, for reviewers, and for research organizations. It is also about monitoring. It is putting in place mechanisms to monitor the effects of policies and practices that are implemented. And it's important to highlight that it is a topic that is specifically relevant for international cooperation. We encourage international cooperation with, so that is cooperation with entities that are established in non-associated third countries. In particular, in those countries that are also active with initiatives or with policies that are around the issue of increasing the reproducibility of research results. Now, we should note also that this action should build on the research results and recommendations emanating from the projects that are selected and funded under the topic 2022 ERA 0141 of Work Programme 2122. And other relevant projects and initiatives. These projects they are about to start their activities in the early 2023, and they will start delivering their first results by the time that this call will be open. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patelis. We go now over to Anne, and we have two topics on gender. The first one is on policy coordination to support all aspects of inclusive gender equality plans. The second on the implementation of inclusive gender equality plans. And please, Anne, take those topics one after the other, and then afterwards we move over to Michaelis.
Thank you, Jörg, and good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I'll be presenting two coordination and support actions for 2024. So the first one, policy coordination to support all aspects of inclusive gender equality plans and policies in the European research area, is very much linked to ERA Policy Agenda Action 5, which is dedicated to promoting gender equality and fostering inclusiveness, taking note of the Ljubljana Declaration on Gender Equality in Research and Innovation. It has a total budget of 3.5 million, and we expect to fund one proposal. And the purpose is to develop a sustainable network of national representatives from member states and associated countries, both from national authorities and national funding organization to support the implementation of this Action 5 of the ERA policy agenda, so the objectives on gender equality and inclusiveness in the ERA. Regarding expected outcomes, it's to ensure that there is an advanced and sustainable policy coordination support among member states and associated countries, but also through stakeholders and citizen engagement. And it aims to address all three levels of inclusiveness to gender equality policies that have been defined in the ERA communication of September 2020. So that's intersectionality, so ensuring that intersections between gender and other social categories are addressed. Sectorial inclusiveness, so involving the private sector and the innovation actors, and the geographical inclusiveness. And the next expected outcomes address this. So the objectives are to improve career paths and working conditions in European research and innovation organization, including in the private sector, through enhanced policy dialogue on inclusive gender equality plans and policies, to increase research quality, societal responsibility, and relevance of knowledge and innovation through the integration of the gender and intersectional dimension in research and innovation content, to increase geographical inclusiveness by targeting less experienced countries and regions in terms of inclusive gender equality policies in research and innovation, and to increase the inclusion of underrepresented and socially disadvantaged persons in European R&I through an intersectional lens on gender equality plan and policies. Next slide, please. Regarding the scope of this topic, the idea is to develop knowledge and build capacities, competences, and expertise on the design, the implementation, the monitoring, and the evaluation of inclusive gender equality plan and policies in R&I, with a variety of European and national stakeholders. And here, a special consideration should be given to mutual learning exercises and really helping national representatives from those less advanced countries to be fully informed and have the capacities to address these inclusive gender equality aspects in national policies. To further the development of a transnational community of practice of funding organization, so research and innovation funding organization, to promote an inclusive and gender responsive culture change in R&I institutions across the EU. There should be a specific focus on developing joint activities with actors from the private sector and innovation and entrepreneurship actors from across the EU. The objective is also to develop various innovative engagement activities to connect citizens, experts, policymakers, and to contribute to effective policymaking on inclusive gender equality in R&I at national and European administration level. And very important, to ensure coordination with ERA-related official groups, such as the ERA Forum and such as the upcoming subgroup on Action 5 that is currently being put into place, and in collaboration with the Commission and in line with ERA objective. So it's one project because the objective is really to gather as many member states and associated countries. So we strongly encourage that at least 23 member states and a large amount of associated countries be participating in these proposals, and to cooperate with the relevant ERA stakeholders and build on the outputs of the previous Horizon Europe projects related to gender equality and inclusiveness. So really all four topics from the 21-22 work program that were dedicated to inclusive gender equality are of relevance, which should be built upon. So that's Gender Action Plus. Sorry, I didn't say next slide. You went a little too fast, but I'm almost done. Can you go back? No? Okay. So Gender Action Plus, which is a policy coordination topic from 2021, Inspire, which is a center of excellence on inclusive gender equality, and the 2022 topics that will be soon starting, the Living Lab on gender responsive innovation, and the support topics on the implementation of inclusive gender equality measures. And actually, this brings me to the next slide, because this topic, support to the implementation of inclusive gender equality plans, is a repetition of the 2022 topic that addressed the same aspects. So this is a peer support scheme to go beyond the mandatory gender equality plan eligibility criterion in Horizon Europe and really open gender equality policies to inclusive aspects. This is, again, of course, very much linked to ERA Policy Agenda number 5, and the budget here is a total of 3 million, with in between 0.5 and 1 million that is expected by proposal, with the objective of funding around 4 projects. Expected outcomes very similar to the twinning scheme under the widening part of this work program is to enhance the reputation, the attractiveness, the inclusiveness of research and innovation excellence and research and innovation excellence of less advanced organizations as a result of implementing inclusive gender equality plans, and to transform research and innovation organization to advance this ERA policy objective on gender equality and inclusiveness. Next slide, please. So the scope, develop methods for exchanging and implementing good practices, materials that are tailored to individual organizations' needs, and to develop and monitor inclusive gender equality plans, support for reinforcing the organization's networking in the area of gender equality and inclusiveness, especially with the already existing communities of practice, develop activities such as on-site visits, trainings on-site and virtuals, workshop, dissemination, outreach, capacity building activities, and implement specific actions in the less advanced institution that will specifically address the opening to intersectionality, and so targeting underrepresented and socially disadvantaged group, including in the context of research, so integration of intersectional sex and gender analysis into research and innovation content. Importantly, the difference with the 2022 topic is that here it's one organization that can be a higher education, a research organization, so performing organization, but also a public body, so a ministry, for example, or a research funding organization that is leading on gender equality and inclusiveness, mentoring at least 3 less advanced organizations of the same type of legal entities from widening countries. We recommend that the partners in the consortia revolve in specific thematic areas, or that the widening partners have similar national or regional backgrounds for a better contextualization of the project. And this should also build on the knowledge and expertise of the related Horizon projects, so the one in particular funded under the 2021 and 2022 topics. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anne. That was very comprehensive, a little bit over time. But with this now, we go to the last topic on next generation artificial intelligence and human behavior, which is with Michaelis, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me and for giving us the opportunity to present what we think a very important call in the field of artificial intelligence ethics. The title of the call is Next Generation AI and Human Behavior, Promoting an Ethical Approach. So the basic objective of this call is to promote a responsible, trustworthy and human-centric design and development of the next generation of artificial intelligence, especially in the field of the study of human behavior. The main idea is to prevent and to mitigate the ethical risks associated with the so-called automatic motion recognition systems, and that is why the expected outcome of this call is to operationalize already existing general guidance on the ethics of AI, to make it practical, applicable, and to deliver specific guidelines that address the ethics dimension of the study of human behavior and cognition in developing and improving AI systems. These guidelines should incorporate ethics into the relevant research and development process, and also take into account strategies for ensuring adequate participation of all those affected by the development, deployment, and use of the relevant applications. So basically, this is a kind of an idea. The idea is to motivate and promote the so-called bottom-up approach, and to make sure that all those that may be affected by the development of these systems in different sectors are also studied and become part of the research design. Another expected outcome is to develop and validate education and training material that reflect the produced guidelines. This should be based on participatory processes that should involve all relevant stakeholders, including citizen groups and industrial actors. So basically, the idea is to develop a material that is going to be used by both the research community and the actual, I would say, end users of these systems. The call opens on the 6th of December next year. It closes on the 12th of March 2024. The foreseen budget is 3 million euros, and that leaves room only for one beneficiary, one successful project. Next slide, please. So the scope of this project is, I would say, multi-level. First of all, is to review the current ethics landscape to understand the ethical challenges associated with the study of human behavior and cognition, and to support the development or improve even the AI systems in this field, and also to kind of scan the horizon of the ethical horizon when it comes to understand the impact of AI on human cognition and behavior. On the base of that horizon scanning, there is an expectation for the beneficiary to develop operational guidelines for AI systems that build on the study of human cognition and behavior in collaboration with networks of experts and based on findings and case studies from similar projects. Another scope related to that call is to develop a toolbox for international cooperation in AI research and development in these areas, and by also taking into account the work in the ethical frontier in countries such as China, Korea, Japan, Canada, and the US. The incorporation also of principles of benefit sharing in AI research and development is also part of the scope of this call. And in that sense, we also promote the need for compliance with the so-called Global Code of Conduct for Research in Resource-Poor Settings, the so-called Trust Code. And last but not least, the call aims to produce innovative training material that reflects the produced guidelines for early career and experienced researchers. Thank you.
Wonderful. So that closes our last part of the work program 23-24. So you see what a spread of activities we have in this work program, which we are doing with basically 75 million. So I think it's quite an achievement of what we have put together here for the years 2023-24. We still have questions coming in. I think we first go back to the colleagues that deal with the IPR management to support open science. Perhaps, Alia, you could reply to the question, should the activities under this topic cover all IPR rights or just copyright? Please, for clarification.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So Indeed, the topic covers IP in general, but for sure, copyright is particularly relevant. Copyright is this set of exclusive rights that authors have on their original works and is particularly relevant for open science, in that copyright sets the condition for access and dissemination of, for example, scientific publications and in certain cases, databases. So for sure, copyright, and it can, of course, cover other rights, and it could be very good that the topic explores how an adequate management of other IP, intellectual property rights also can contribute to open science, indeed.
Very good. And then we have one for Jean-François on the Global Cooperation for Non-Profit Open Access Publishing. Would you recommend some non-associated third countries in particular?
The answer will be short. No, not really. I mean, we heard you, Jörg, also saying that Switzerland and the UK would be eligible, which is very fine. I think the idea of the topic is, well, certainly we can explore within our continent. There are certainly some countries that deserve some support, but we're looking really transatlantic, trans-Pacific, and really the world is going to be the playground. So as long as the proposals are motivated, I think they will be evaluated. So the answer is no.
Okay, and remember, don't travel too much on this one.
Exactly.
Then we have a question for Pantelis. For the reproducibility of scientific results, any specific domains that you have in mind?
Thanks. Well, yeah, indeed, there are thematic areas where reproducibility has been discussed more than others, but we see recently and increasingly that the issue of reproducibility comes up in virtually every scientific discipline. So for this topic, there's no prescription on focusing on specific thematic areas. Quite the opposite. It is about having a broad disciplinary representation, let's say, of thematic areas.
Okay, very good. And then perhaps, Anne, for you, two quick questions. One commenting on some widening countries where higher education institutions are not less advanced in gender inclusiveness. Could they be in a mentoring role? And the second question on how to best include underrepresented and socially disadvantaged people in European R&I consortia in general.
Thank you. So for the first question, yes, if some institutions in widening countries are advanced in gender equality and inclusiveness, they can very much be mentors, but they should mentor at least 3 organizations from less advanced from the widening countries. Then the second question, so how to best include underrepresented and socially disadvantaged persons. So I would refer you to a report that was recently published by the Commission on inclusive gender equality policies, which is a pilot study of existing national and institutional intersectional gender equality plans and policies, or inclusive gender equality plans and policies, and also to the INSPIRE project, the Center of Excellence, which core purpose is to examine this and provide tools and examples on how to best develop this intersectional approach to gender equality. So you will have links in Cordis to the report and to the projects that can help you in developing this.
Many thanks, Anne. Perhaps a very quick yes or no answer on the very last question. Could an organization from widening country that does not have yet a gender equality plan in place participate in this call?
Well, no, because it's an eligibility criterion to any project, any work program part in Horizon Europe. Public bodies, research organization, and higher education institution need to have in place a gender equality plan that fulfills a set of mandatory requirements to participate in Horizon Europe. So they do need to have a gender equality plan. And it's about opening to inclusiveness.
But if I remember correctly, the condition is that by the time of the signature of the grant agreement, the plan is in place. So
absolutely.
Prevents them from applying and having that in place by the time that they sign. Very good. Okay.
At grant agreement preparation, they need to have the JEP in place.
good. So not for submitting the proposal, but by the time that the proposal is signed up, if successful, it has to be in place. Very good. Okay, so I think with this we can slowly wrap up. First of all, because we had many references to ongoing projects or projects about to be started. You need information on those, you go to Cordis and you find the information there. Secondly, I cannot leave the studio without thanking the colleagues here, Laila, Casimir and the others that have been running this show. It all looked so smoothly, but there was a lot of hard work in the preparation. So many thanks to you. It was a big pleasure to be here, and the good atmosphere is really a credit to the studio people. Then last but not least, the thank to all the colleagues that were involved in this, in my team, across the DG and in REA again, those that take care of the project. Without REA, we wouldn't have the projects running, so many thanks again to that side. I hope to see you at some point also again live in Brussels for an info day, but I think the quality of what we delivered today and the audience that we reached is clearly a sign that we have to continue, at least in a hybrid form. So we wish all good luck with the applications. We want to receive many applications because we want to have good proposals and selective in choosing proposals. Have a nice evening and see you at some point here in Brussels. Thank you.